When Eric Rosen took the reins at Kansas City's most prestigious theater, he made it clear he wanted the rep to take a bigger role in the creation of new plays.
They've already created several new world premieres, including a hip-hop musical before Hamilton. And underway right now, they've got something called Origin KC.
Long story short, two brand new productions are running in rotation at the Copaken Stage downtown.
We've been watching one of them, Fire in Dreamland, since it first started taking shape back in December.
It's been an incredible year and really exciting and terrifying to end the season with this brand new adventure, this Origin KC Festival.
What we're doing together is creating visibility for new stories that need to be told.
What the play is asking us to do is to jump in time as if we were doing jump cuts.
To me, Kate is a shipwreck and her apartment is washed up on the beach, represented by drifted sand dunes and a city bench.
Maybe nothing shows the size of the team it takes, cast and crew, designers, marketers, ticket sellers, better than this opening day meeting at the Kansas City Rep. Actually, it's a twofer. In less than a month, they'll craft two world premieres, Lot's Wife and Fire in Dreamland.
Oh, let's not say cold and in despair on that very first page. She'll just be cold and in despair.
Fire first saw the light of day last winter in a staged reading upstairs in the Rep's new lounge.
There's something wonderful about new work, which is because it hasn't been done before, because these are world premieres, you can't look to other productions. Oh, how did they solve that issue? You know, so you have to listen in a different way as the team of artists.
Because I think the whole point was that it was totally worth it, even though Liam Neeson was scared a lot of the time, because they were not messing around.
In the creation of new work, in fact, the audiences do become actually part of the DNA of a piece of theater, because the way they laugh or engage or disengage, playwright hears that, thinks about that, continues to shape the piece.
Do you know what I mean?
The playwright is Rinna Groff. Rinna's been to Kansas City before. She co-wrote the musical Saved, which the theater staged a few years back. This play has New York City in its DNA, born from research that spurred her to read up on Coney Island and the devastating fires that befell it.
In the beginning, when I was doing that research, I thought it's going to be set in 1911 and it's going to have something to do with this fire. But as I kept working and as the play kept emerging, then it became about people who were trying to tell that story of that fire that happened long ago, and then one of them became a filmmaker and it became about film in certain ways. It's still a really important part of the play, but the play really is about looking at the past. It's not about the past.
Look, stop. I'm really sorry that he was supposed to be there, but I am not a person who can help you with that.
When it starts, she's in a very frustrated place in her life. And she meets someone who has a dream and has a vision, and she kind of is inspired by that.
I keep telling myself I'll just quit, go back to grad school. It's like there's nothing left to study. I already have 2 masters and a teaching certificate.
Oh, you are a teacher?
Dramatizing the kinds of transitions that often face women in their 30s rings true for Brie Elrod. And the dialogue between her character Kate and Jaap, the Dutch filmmaker that she meets on the boardwalk, is rolling easily off both their tongues, even with the constant changes the script has undergone.
You do have to really listen. You have to really engage with the person. I mean, we're all on stage pretty much all the time. So there's no going off stage and catching your breath, thinking about the next thing. I mean, this is one, and there's no intermission in the show. So it's once you start going, it is really like a roller coaster.
I will show this scene on YouTube, and if many people see it and contribute something, then we move forward.
They're really good with my language.
You walked out on me.
I never walked out on you.
Yes,
And Marissa, I think she really gets my language and gets my sense of humor. There are all these steps of the process. You always keep coming back to what is the story we're trying to tell? Do we need to add anything that would help us to tell that story? And do we need to take anything away that just gets in the way of the understanding of that story?
One thing that's continued to call for clarity is that third body on stage throughout the play. Let's call him the clapper.
One of our actors who's playing Lance, Brian Huthert, has this slate board that he clacks, and there's a wonderful percussive nature to the way that we have almost jump cuts from scene to scene very quickly. Those clacks have been written to the script from draft one, but it wasn't until the December workshop here that we realized how much we enjoyed seeing an actor actually making the sound.
And when you're ready.
There are many different kinds of relationships between directors and designers. I think it's based on the people and the plays. Marissa is a great collaborator and one of my favorite people to work with.
With so many cinematic elements in play here, a sound designer has plenty to do. In fact, Brendan Honest has been working on this project for over a year. Now, as the action moves onto the Copaken stage, all those clapper snaps, camera clicks, lions' roars, and music cues must be woven together to draw an audience in.
I would love for them to notice all the things I've done with this piece, but I'd like to notice them afterwards when they're talking about it, rather than in the moment. When they're in the moment, they should be watching the actor and being moved by that and being moved by the stagecraft.
The others are no longer getting credit.
Speaking of stagecraft, don't forget there are 2 shows running in the kind of rotating rep the theater hasn't actually done for decades. Thematically, turns out that Lot's wife and Fire in Dreamland are closer than expected. But physically, not so much.
I think maybe we're sharing a wall here and there, but other than that, it is, and I was joking with a friend of mine that it's, as soon as my last moment happens on stage, you hear the tech crew like zzz, zzz, like taking the set down to put up for Lot's wife.
I think Rep's biggest strength is our production teams are incredibly skilled, and whether it's doing something hugely complicated or these sets which are complex but they are designed with an eye towards you have to be able to turn it over in 1 hour, it's really just a question of how you design it and how you build it, and we're good at that stuff.
Eric Rosen figures that putting his own script in the mix signals he's got skin in the game too. 8 years into his tenure, Origin KC is the most visible proof yet of the Rep's commitment to new works.
It's a sort of a spree of celebrations, and we will be offering pre-show conversations we call Making the Play, as well as post-show conversations.
Divorce!
Our hope is to deepen audiences' experience with the new work.
A very central thing about the play for me has always been the image of the lion with its mane on fire. And I feel like there are things that are happening that make that image even more alive. But the play, more and more, is becoming about how do we define our worth? How do we decide that what we're doing is what we should be doing? How do we feel at home in what we're doing?
A show that only has 1 production here and never seen again, we might love, but we prefer a show to start here and then go on to another regional and then go on to New York and then go on to be licensed around the country. We think Kansas City is the ideal origination point for creative work. We're the center of the country. Artists can get here from anywhere. Our own local artists here have so much pride in what we do.
I know you do not like to be late for your work as a petty bureaucrat.
To put the playwright in the center of this originating point is really what the festival is all about.
It's not a story, it's a film.